Tom. How's it going? I am a little sad that our fast friendship over the
Yeah,
convoy will be sort of, I don't
yeah.
want to say it's going to be put on ice, but we're not going to see you every day.
No, no, this is my last show.
Oh, sad. I hope we can
Yeah, I
figure out
know.
something else to keep you around.
Yeah, I hope so
I
too.
guess that's
You
my
guys are
job.
a lot of fun. You guys are a lot of fun.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about the final day of the commission. And as I was saying to the kids, I say kids because
Yeah.
William's involved, but it's
Yeah.
it felt longer than 31 days, but also shorter than 31 days
Yeah.
somehow simultaneously. It's very strange. But I
Hmm.
think today the star of the show, as I said at the beginning, was Eva Chipiuk. The
Yes.
perfect tone. And she decided that she was going to take her time to make sure that the people who went to Ottawa to be heard by their prime minister were at least able to be heard by him. And he couldn't squirm,
Hmm.
he couldn't run away, and he couldn't call them names. He couldn't.
Yeah.
And the worst part was he tried to say, I didn't call them names, which he definitely did every opportunity that
Yeah.
he had. But I mean,
Yes.
Eva really put it to him. These are the people you hurt.
Yes.
And and he decided to do an ad for Pfizer instead of actually listening and acknowledging the pain he caused.
Yeah. And you know what? We were all so proud of Eva at the end of that.
Yeah.
And I can speak from, I'd like to be able to say I'm speaking as her client, right? But it's not that. It's a deep friendship that I've been fortunate to be part of with Eva and Keith and a lot of other people that were part of the convoy. And every day Keith and Eva were there with us during the convoy, when they got involved. And I'm so proud of Eva for how she did that. And she was the perfect person to go and deliver that
She was.
message today. Like we kind of looked at the whole legal team today and said, okay, who's the best to go and deliver a message on behalf of Canadians that we didn't get to deliver to Justin Trudeau last February when we were begging for it. And Eva was the perfect person to go and deliver that message. And that's why, the team, as a team, we all decided that, today is not about the legal arguments because Brendan Miller had done a great job. He brought us to the 1 yard line.
Yeah.
But it took somebody like Eva to really put the ball into the end zone, and she delivered it like a master.
Well, we know how Justin
Very
Trudeau
proud.
feels about, how he feels about smart, powerful women that he can't
Yes.
control, right?
Hmm.
They tie him in a real
Absolutely.
knot. And I'm sure
Hmm.
he was excessively uncomfortable today. He prides himself on being a feminist, except until he runs up against
Yeah.
a woman who's far smarter than him. And that's what happened
Yes.
to him today.
That's exactly what happened to him today. And what I loved about it is that Eva really made him confront the harms that he had done in the most limited amount of time possible too, right? I
Mhm.
had seen her statement. We had all seen her statement. They were working on it pretty late last night, and her questions, sorry, not the statement, but her questions to him. And she rehearsed it at lunch, timed it and everything. And, with only 10 minutes, she had 10 minutes in this entire 10, almost 11-month ordeal to make Justin Trudeau confront the names and the faces of the people that he deliberately and solely impacted. The decisions rest at the top. They, like it or not, whether you voted for Justin Trudeau or not, he is the final decision maker in the government of Canada. It was his determination to see that the Emergency Act was invoked against Canadian tax-paying citizens and voters. And she got 10 minutes to make him really look at the human cost of what he has been putting Canadians through. And it was pretty disgusting and disingenuous the way he said, that final question she asked him, that final one at the end. And his smug answer was, I'm not afraid, and neither is my government. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? I'm sure Herman Goebbels said the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. We have that at clip 27. Maybe we'll show that. It was really something else.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was truly a question that Canadians do want answers to. And she took the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to ask it. And he just sort of, with his smug little smirk, he just so smug. Anyways, I'm at a loss for words. Let's roll this.
Minister Blair, Public Safety Minister, Minister Mendicino, National Security Intelligence Advisor Jody Thomas, and RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki, and today you testified that the federal government was committed to exhausting all alternatives to a resolution prior to making a decision to invoke the extraordinary powers of the Emergencies Act. Do you agree that that accurately describes your government's position?
That the invocation of the Emergencies Act was a measure of last resort, was not something to be taken lightly.
Thank you.
And something to do when other options were not effective.
And you are aware that the OPP, along with others, developed an engagement proposal, and you were advised of that proposal at the IRG meeting on February 12th, correct?
It was a proposal, but we had, and it was presented to us, we had more questions about how it would actually work. It was not a complete proposal.
My last question, Mr. Prime Minister, when did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
That's a very
I
unfair...
am not, and we are not.
Those are my questions.
Get his stupid face. Oh,
it's pretty cringy. That's for sure, right? Like she asked an important question that he had to have known that she would have only asked if she wasn't representing at least 6 million Canadians in this country, and his immediate go-to was to grin in pure defiance, and then to use words to say, I'm not and we're not. Basically, it's very grotesque to see. One thing I noticed with him, unlike any other witness that we had seen, there were several times that he would actually turn and face the audience and lecture the audience.
He's performing.
He was performing. I was almost expecting to hear his father's eulogy that, basically put him on the map. I was expecting to hear a tear or see a tear or something. I thought he was going to be going for, a Juno Award, to be perfectly honest. It's a very surreal thing to sit in the room. That's the first time I've ever actually been in the same room as him.
I'm sorry about your luck.
Yeah. I'm going to go have a shower tonight. Anyway, I find he was so incredibly well prepared for that. And I heard other people say that, in the back room today, to say how surprised and how comfortable he was in that room. He had a smugness and arrogance about him that was different than I noticed in the other two, the previous days, Mendicino and the Attorney General.
Yeah, he's an actor, though.
He's an actor.
This is just a stage.
Yeah. Sorry, I've still got the cold, the Ottawa hack. I get it every time I come here, apparently.
Now, sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I'll give you a little break here. Let's go to clip 25, because this is after Eva reads those statements about people who are saying, the people are so whipped into a frenzy that they're saying that I should be denied health care, that I should die. Friends and family are divided from each other based on government rhetoric. She goes through these statements, and Justin Trudeau doubles down and says that he wishes he could have done more. This is his Pfizer salesman routine to get people vaccinated. What the hell? Anyway, let's roll clip 25. What a ghoul this guy is.
Yeah.
You have now heard the statements from some of the many concerned Canadians who felt compelled to support the protesters. Do you now understand the reason so many Canadians came to Ottawa with such resolve in the midst of a harsh, cold Canadian winter because of the harms caused by your government COVID mandates, and they wanted to be heard?
I am moved, and I was moved as I heard these testimonies, as I saw the depth of hurt and anxiety about the present and the future expressed by so many people. The COVID pandemic was unbelievably difficult on all Canadians. And my job throughout this pandemic was to keep Canadians safe. And the way that I chose to do that was to lean on public health officials, lean on experts and science on the best way to keep Canadians safe. And because Canadians got vaccinated to over 80%, we had fewer deaths in Canada than places that didn't reach that. And every heartbreaking story I hear of a family who sat beside the bed of a loved one dying because they had believed that the vaccines were more dangerous than the disease, I take personally, because I wish I could have done more
and
to
I don't mean
convince people
to cut
to
you
get
off.
vaccinated.
Eva is somehow the most patient person on the face of the earth. I don't know how she stood there and listened to him make the cries of Canadians about himself, about how he takes things personally. As I said to William and Alexa, Trudeau just loves to be the bride at every wedding and the corpse at every funeral. And he did it there too.
Yes, absolutely. And I've often joked and said, yeah, the best way for the human species to get back to the moon is if they get vaccinated, right? Somehow getting vaccinated just solves every challenge, every problem. Yeah. He's a one-trick pony with that line. And he just, it's wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat. It's the same talking points. And he was born into this line of business, right? I mean, from his father, he's been around politics since he was, a child. So he understands what it means to spin and to reframe. Like, he's been doing it probably his whole entire life. And you just saw like a master, like he should be doing master classes on how to spin things towards your own advantage. And you're right. He's always the bride, never the bridesmaid. That's for sure. In terms of somehow this making himself the benevolent leader of all things good and wholesome. And it's frustrating to watch because he completely ignores the central point of what Eva was saying. You now just heard all of the reasons why Canadians endured a hard, cold Canadian winter. They didn't do it because they needed a vaccine. What they did it for was because they lost their jobs. They were demonized by him and everyone who followed his rhetoric, demonized by the media. I lost my job. Why? Because the judicial system in this country, the doctors and the lawyers, and I say with exception, of course, failed right. to follow basic principles of their professions and to abide by informed consent, which is criminal code stuff. When you violate informed consent, it's actually criminal assault. Where were the lawyers when this happened? How is it that all of a sudden a host or hostess in a restaurant is now able to, with impunity, violate the Privacy Act of this country? These people, leadership started at the top with the Prime Minister. And with impunity, every level, every institution in this country took the lead from the Prime Minister of Canada, and they violated every single law and institution that was meant to protect us. So if people believe for a minute that this had anything to do with COVID-19, why we were protesting had nothing to do with COVID-19. It had everything to do about the rule of law in this country and how COVID was the symptom that proved that it was easy, flawlessly easy in this country to just violate your rights, because now our rights, COVID was the test, and the test proved that our rights were easily violated by the government. Why? Because when the government gets cornered, they just reframe the definition of what laws are supposed to mean, like we saw between the Emergency Act and CSIS Section 2. They just reframe the whole narrative and give themselves extraordinary powers to violate our rights. So to me, it never had anything to do with the shot or COVID or lockdowns. It had everything to do with the fact that the rule of law in this country is paper thin, and that premise is supported by the actions of all the courts and all the cowardly lawyers and doctors in this country.
It was a large-scale ASH conformity test. And if you've ever been in a room alone with Ezra for about 20 minutes, he'll open up his phone and make you watch an ASH conformity test video. Mm-hmm. And the ASH conformity test, for people who don't know, it is it's really based on an appeal to authority. Mm-hmm. So will you go along to get along if everybody else in the room is saying one thing, but you 100% know that that it's wrong? This is the ASH conformity mm-hmm. test.
Yes.
And so these guys are being shown, I forget what they're being shown here, but basically there's one guy in the room who's not part of the test. Everybody else is part of the test. Like mm-hmm. they're actors in the test. And I think it is, okay, can you tell me which one is the shortest? And so mm-hmm. everybody else is picking one that is not the shortest, and you know that's the shortest, but will you go along because everybody else is? Or are you the kind of person who says, I won't go along? And what happens is in some of these tests is they'll have one or two people who are also not part of the actors in the test. And once somebody breaks, everybody starts breaking. And that's what the Convoy did. The Convoy was a nationwide ASH conformity test where you knew you believed a certain thing. You knew certain things to be true. But until the truckers said, no, this is BS. We don't have to live like that. And we don't have to get forcibly injected against, as you say, unemployment and not a disease. Once they stood up, everybody else stood up. And that's what's happening here. It was a nationwide ASH conformity test.
And you know what, I want to say something, and I please, I don't mean to make this about me, but I want to draw on an actual experience that I had with this exact same thing, because I'm very aware of this phenomenon. Usually the story I've heard is about a bunch of monkeys in a cage with a ladder, but I'll leave that one alone. But here's the thing. When I got fired from my teaching job, the college I belonged to put out an email from the president of the college, and she used, language like, let me be clear, very aggressive language in her letter. And I looked at that and I said, well, because of my Army pension, I'm a little bit less financially vulnerable, but even if that didn't matter, I still would have said, no, that's wrong. So I stood up and I actually sent an email to as many faculty, the president herself, HR VP, and all the deans that I personally knew, and all the faculty, saying, this is wrong. I don't know how you're getting around all these Canadian laws. This is immoral, illegal, and unethical. And funny, I got fired the same week as Julie Ponesse. And she did the same thing in her school. And so there was people that, they were the ones that were the non-actors inside the test. And you know what? I fully expected all of the other people to come out of hiding and back me up and say, you know what, Tom, you're right. Because I put my personal email on the email to all the faculty. We're talking like 250 people. I expected them to all back me up. And you know what happened? The exact opposite. The horde actually turned on me. Yeah. All of them, including my own boss, the dean that I worked for, and a bunch of people. And somebody said, you know what, let's kind of speak out against this guy. One of the PhDs said, no, I think we should speak out against this guy personally. And this was the test that the college I belonged to in Barrie failed miserably. Right? And I hate to say it, but I hope someday in the future I run it. And I've lost friends. I lost good friends that I worked with. They all turned on me. But that's not unusual given this time. But I think this test is bigger and more serious than we all think it is, because, it's like you're doubling down with hypnosis. Or mass formation psychosis is what it's now popularly phrased as. It's disturbing. I expected people to back me up, but they didn't.
There's there's another experiment, and I think about this all the time. Every time I see one of these public health officers, I call the Milgram one.
Milgram, yeah.
The Milgram experiment, because we all went through exactly that. When we have our public health officers, I call them public health necromancers because they use the dead and dying to control the living.
Yeah.
But the Milgram experiment, for people who don't know, is what will you do if somebody in a lab coat tells you to do it? Would you shock another person until you maybe think they're dead? Would you do it if a guy in a lab coat told you to do it? And a surprising number of people you think are smart would do it. Because a guy in a lab coat, you don't even know he's a doctor. Like literally, they never even told these people that guy's a doctor. He just wore a lab coat, which gives off the perception of that he's someone of authority, someone who knows better. And basically they said, would you keep shocking this guy? Now, nobody was actually shocked. I think the guy was an actor. But a substantial amount of people would do whatever a guy in a lab coat told them. And if you've been on Twitter lately, you know that those people are real and they are wearing masks in their profile pictures.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we should go to, we should wrap up because these guys have had a very long day. I bet you guys all want to go for beers together.
Sorry.
It's okay. Let's go to clip 26. It's Eva reminding the Prime Minister what his role is as the Prime Minister, and it's not to divide the country into medical status.
People have testified in this inquiry referencing your widely published comments and calling the unvaccinated racists and misogynists. And we have heard testimony in this inquiry about how some of your officials wanted to label protesters as terrorists. Would you agree with me that one of the most important roles of a Prime Minister is to unite Canadians and not divide them by engaging in name-calling?
I did not call people who were unvaccinated names. I highlighted there is a difference between people who are hesitant to get vaccinated for any range of reasons and people who deliberately spread misinformation that puts at risk the life and health of their fellow Canadians. My focus every step of the way, and the primary responsibility of a Prime Minister, is to keep Canadians safe and alive.
Small fringe minority with unacceptable views is what he called them. And that's not, he didn't preface that with saying, oh, but these are people who are spreading disinformation about vaccinations. He didn't say that. That's what he called the convoy.
Well, fun fact, how many Canadians ever heard the word misogynist until it was uttered by that man? How many people honestly ever used that word in this country until Justin Trudeau? Basically, he should literally. Rob Kittredge is a patent lawyer. Maybe I should, talk to him about helping Justin Trudeau out on that one, right? He's like the whole room. Like Rouleau at one point had to threaten to clear the room on our side of the room because the crowd was really having a hard time, choking down his lies.
Yeah. I mean, it is absolute gaslighting. They are extremists. They don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic. It's a small group, but that takes up space. So what do you want to do with them, Justin? What do you want to do with them? This is genocide talk, by the way. Like when they're like, oh, they're just taking up space. What do you want to do with them? Where should they go? Like you want to follow the science. Things take up space when they exist. So what do you want them to do? Not exist?
Yeah. And add that to the level of fear. So if we go back a year ago in this country, let's talk about the level of fear that we had. We had Quebec, who was now threatening to not let unvaccinated people get groceries. We had slow rolling, I'll use that as a joke, slow rolling lockdowns. We had mask mandates. We had vaccine passports. We had quarantine hotels, and you guys covered it extensively in the GTA, where in the early days of the quarantine hotels, I remember a story you guys did where there was a woman taken by law enforcement right off the plane
Yeah.
and ushered to a quarantine hotel, and they refused to tell her husband or speak to her husband of the location she was going, and she was in a Suburban for well over an hour traveling to an undisclosed location. And as far as I'm concerned, that's kidnapping. If I was her husband, I would have been on the phone calling the RCMP to say that my wife had been abducted, because it's exactly what it was. And you know, you look at, combine that with all the rhetoric coming from the mainstream media, that newspaper article that came out last year, all the tweets, the quoted tweets on the front page of one of the mainstream newspapers, vilifying unvaccinated people. If you look at the level of fear that people in this country were going through a year ago, no wonder that convoy rolling across this country was A, humongous, and B, so well supported by millions of Canadians and Americans and Europeans in this country. And so they're all sitting here as if though these benevolent leaders, you know, were protecting and not doing enough to protect their children. Well, I'm sorry. You disgusting people set the conditions for a level of fear that nobody has ever seen on this continent, other than maybe the Japanese that were interned in World War II.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. Or let's say Indigenous people that have been interned in this country. This is how we all felt. We all felt like this was 1933 and Adolf Hitler had just been put into power as the Chancellor of Germany. This is how people that were unvaccinated felt in this country. And why? Because of Justin Trudeau and his cabinet. And
they didn't know when it was going to end. You know, there was no end in sight. They kept saying, follow the science, but anybody who was looking was thinking, they're not following the science. So what is going to happen to me next? And so, there was a substantial portion of Canadians, 6 million of nearly 40 million Canadians, were basically othered from society, abandoned by their friends, put out of work, abandoned by their family, not allowed to travel, disconnected, couldn't celebrate holidays, couldn't go work out, couldn't watch their kids play hockey. And Justin Trudeau just sort of shrugs it off and says, no, I didn't play any sort of role in doing that to those people.
I didn't do enough, which means I didn't finish the job. Why? Because a whole bunch of truckers came to Ottawa and put a stop to his plan. Yeah. And that's the reality, right? There's people that started this convoy, you know, and then you can't do anything without the support of this. And all of the people that came to the convoy on weekends, like we spoke about the other night, they were the perfect examples or sample of everything that is Canadian. From every province they came to this country, and every territory was represented at the convoy in Ottawa and other locations. So, you know, that's the big question that really I don't think was explored nearly enough by any of the legal teams. It's like, why did all of these protests pop up all over Canada and then all over the world? Why? Because free citizens were terrified of their own governments. And they took it upon themselves to push back, which we all believed was our Section 2 Charter right, the right to peacefully assemble. And again, I still have yet to hear, the commission's over, but I've yet to hear at what point did the convoy become illegal. They still can't answer that question, but they just say it's an illegal illegal occupation, a blockade. These are all military terms, by the way. They're not meant for your citizens. We were not an occupying army, which is the definition of the word. But I understand the context. But in reality, let's talk about how much fear occupied all of our minds as 6 million unvaccinated Canadians. Yeah, it is overwhelming at times. And I mean, do we really want to talk about the number of small communities that have popped up all over this country in more rural areas? People are walking away from society because they realize how disgustingly corrupt it is in this country. Right? They don't want to be governed anymore. They're taking steps to form their own independent communities. They're homeschooling. They're finding medical needs. They're getting out of the system. And I can't say I blame them, because that's the exact reason why I bought all my land, because I'm done with this crap.
Well, as they say, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I think the natural human inclination is to be free. People will
It
only
is.
be they will only be caged birds in fancy cages for so long until
Mhm.
they've had enough. And while Justin Trudeau, as you say, wants to be a benevolent leader, I'm just looking out for my people. I'm keeping them safe. You're keeping them caged. And
Yes.
sometimes, you know what? I'll be an ugly seagull flying free before I'm a fancy
Mhm.
little parakeet in a gilded cage. That's for sure.
Agreed.
Well, you know what, Tom?
Absolutely.
I think we should leave it on that note. I think
Mhm.
probably my friends in the studio there, both in Toronto, but also in the satellite studio of the Airbnb, would probably
Mhm.
like to go and get something to eat and maybe a beer and celebrate the end of 31 long days of work. Tom, thank you so much for your stand for freedom from the very beginning, but also for your expert analysis from the inside of both the commission, but also from inside the convoy from the very beginning. You don't have to come hang out with us every night in the Airbnb, but you do, and we appreciate it. And you always bring a very unique perspective. And like I said, I'm sort of sad that it's coming to an end. This is probably
Yeah,
one of
me
the good
too.
things that came out of the commission. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to go get a job as a Walmart greeter. So if Walmart, you're listening, I'm looking for a job now. Does having a master's degree qualify me to say hi to people at Walmart? I hope so, because I'm
Uh,
tired.
Olivia says we have one chat. I'm
Mhm.
not sure where it is though, Olivia. Maybe we should get to it because someone was generous with us. I'm looking. Oh, where they're pinned in the main thread. Okay. Well, I don't know where that is, and I'm looking right now on my phone. I have one from
Okay.
Annalisa,
Mhm.
1964. Sorry if we can throw to that one first, because that's the only one I have. Perfect. Annalisa, 1964 gives us $10. Says, I must send a big shout out to William, you manly
Mhm.
man. Don't worry, Sheila. My sweet Menzies still has my heart. Oh, this is Annalisa.
Yeah.
David Menzies in the bloodstream like an AstraZeneca clot with her. Anyway, she says you're all amazing. And then we've got Shauna Marie G83, $10. Alan, you did this is for Alan Honor. Alan, you did an
Mhm.
amazing job. I think it was very wise to have you speak last, as you're articulate and very matter of fact, but your demeanor is thoughtful, and therefore you represent
Mhm.
the truckers very effectively. Yeah, he does a great job. And Shauna Marie G83 gives us another $5. I can't believe Trudeau had the audacity to swear on the Bible and blatantly lie. I have
Mhm.
lots of things to say. I'm just going to keep them to myself. If in the end justice is not served, he will have to meet his maker and experience the full wrath of God for his actions. You know what? From your lips to God's ears, Shauna Marie.
Mhm.
And another one from Shauna Marie G83-5. God love Eva. She brought heart into it.
Yeah.
Boy, did she have. She was
Mhm.
fantastic. The perfect
Yeah.
bookend. And
Yes.
says, I truly believe that Trudeau doesn't have a compassionate cell in his body. It's a battle between those with integrity and those without. Like everything, Shauna, I think it's a battle between good and evil. And the good news is that in the end, and it might be long, but good always wins.
Mhm. Can I give one last final thought?
Yeah, of course.
So I started watching Rebel at the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't watch any mainstream media, nothing. And you know why I watched you guys? Because your segments were always so long and you guys never gave yourselves an opportunity to edit the
Yeah.
story. It was always raw and it was always as truthful as you could possibly make it. And you covered all of the stories that people needed to hear, the stories that were not getting out, that were being literally stonewalled by all the mainstream media and the government. And you guys went out and you fought at a lot of personal cost. You got Alexa that got shot in the leg by a projectile. People were pepper sprayed. You guys covered all the stories. You got arrested. You guys fought to get the truth into the hands of the people. And so, to have the opportunity to participate with Rebel News and to come here, I mean, my time for you guys is a thank you for you guys. It's not taking away time from me. It's actually me giving back to what you guys did for me personally in the 2 years and a half now leading up to this commission. So I really want to thank everybody at Rebel News for everything you guys have ever done, fighting for the stories and telling the truth to Canadians, because without you guys, nobody would have ever had a fair chance at learning what the hell was really going on in this country, because you guys were the first and the only true ones out there digging for the truth. So thank you guys so much.
Well, Tom, I really appreciate those kind words. You've spent some time with us, so you know that we're all just normal, average people. And I think that's what I strive to do here at Rebel News, is give a voice to the normal, average person that the mainstream media generally looks at like they're a zoo animal. But at the end of the day, none of this is possible without the support of our viewers at home. You know, that we see it all the time when we're out on the streets. There are people who are cheering for us to just keep going and keep fighting and telling the stories that matter every day. So while you're thanking me, I'm going to thank our viewers at home and everybody who supports us, particularly at truckercommission.com. We don't rely on Justin Trudeau. We rely on the support and love of our viewers, and we feel it, and we're grateful for it. And so on this very last day of the Trucker Commission, I just want to thank everybody at home for their ongoing support of us here at Rebel News. And with that, Love Fest, let's wrap her up. And as David Menzies always says, stay sane.
What do you say, sir, to the suggestion that the decision to invoke the Emergencies Act on February 14th of this year was politically motivated?
My motivation was entirely about ensuring the safety of Canadians. My secondary motivation was making sure Canadians continue to have confidence in their institutions and in our society's ability to function and enforce the rule of law when it's not being respected. Politics was not a motivation at all in the invocation of the Emergencies Act.